Danielle Freeman was 34 years old when she left work early to surprise her husband at the airport, a cup of his favorite coffee sweating in her hand. Terrence's flight had just landed from a 3-day conference in Charlotte. She stood by the arrivals doors, smiling, rehearsing what she'd say. Then the doors opened, and he walked out laughing, his hand resting on the lower back of the woman beside him. Renee. Her best friend since college, maid of honor at her own wedding. They weren't scanning the crowd. They weren't hiding anything. They simply didn't expect anyone who mattered to be watching. Danny didn't call out. She didn't cry. She stepped behind a pillar and let them walk past close enough to touch, close enough to hear Renee laugh at something only he understood. Neither of them noticed her. Neither of them knew what she did for a living or how good she was at finding what people tried to hide. She got back in her car, set the coffee down, and said nothing at all. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The Hendricks file was 4 inches thick. Danny had built it herself, receipt by receipt, timestamp by timestamp, one small lie stacked on top of another until the whole thing became impossible to ignore. The claimant had said he couldn't walk, couldn't work, couldn't lift more than 5 pounds without pain. Danny had a photo of him carrying a cooler at a tailgate party, beer in hand, laughing at the sky. She closed the folder and slid it across her desk toward her manager, Ray. "Done," she said. Ray flipped it open, scanned the top page, and let out a low whistle. 3 years this guy's been collecting. How'd you find the tailgate photos? His cousin tagged him on Facebook. He had his profile locked, but she didn't. Ray shook his head slowly, the way he always did when she handed him something clean. "You're too good at this, Freeman." She almost smiled. Almost. She looked at the clock on the wall above Ray's door. 4:12 p.m. Terrence's flight landed at 6:05. Her desk was the organized kind of cluttered. Color-coded tabs, a half-empty mug of coffee she kept forgetting to finish, a sticky note from 2 weeks ago that read, "Call Mom back," in her own handwriting. She'd been here since 7 this morning. She'd been here since 7 most mornings this month. She pulled up her email, scanned it, closed it. She pulled up her phone and looked at the last text Terrence had sent her. It was from 2 days ago. Flight info attached. Should be home around 7. No miss you. No can't wait to see you. Just logistics. The way you'd update a roommate. She set the phone face down on the desk. It hadn't always been like this. She knew that. 7 years ago, he used to call her in the middle of the workday just to say he was thinking about her. He used to reach for her hand in parking lots, without thinking, the way people do when it's just habit, when it's just natural. That had been real. She was sure of it. But the last 8 months had been quiet in a way that felt heavy. More trips, more regional conferences and client dinners and early morning departures that she'd stopped asking detailed questions about, not because she didn't care, but because his answers had started to feel rehearsed. She'd told herself it was his job. She'd told herself she was tired and reading into things. She was good at reading into things. That was the problem sometimes. "You've been working so much you've stopped taking care of yourself," he'd said last month, casually, while she was getting ready for his company dinner. "I'm just saying, you used to make more of an effort." She'd stood very still in front of the mirror. She'd looked at herself, the same face, the same woman, and she had not said anything back. She was turning 35 next month. She thought about that more than she wanted to. At 4:30, she made a decision. She shut down her computer, grabbed her bag, and told Ray she was cutting out early. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She pulled her jacket off the back of her chair. "Just going to do something nice." She stopped at the coffee place on the way. The good one, not the drive-thru, the one where the baristas knew Terrence's order because she'd mentioned it enough times. Large dark roast, 1 sugar, no cream. Simple, the way he liked it. She held the warm cup on the drive to the airport and let herself feel hopeful. She thought about their 2nd anniversary, when he surprised her with a weekend in Savannah, and they stayed in a hotel with a clawfoot tub and ate oysters by the water. She thought about the way he used to laugh, really laugh, his whole face involved. She thought about how they used to talk through entire dinners and never once look at their phones. She could get back there. She believed that. People got distant, and then they found their way back. That happened all the time. She just needed to stop letting work swallow her whole, needed to stop being so serious about everything, needed to remind them both, that she was still here. She texted Camille at a red light, leaving work early to pick up Terrence at the airport, bringing coffee, surprising him. Camille's response came in 30 seconds. "You? Leaving work early? Alert the media. That's sweet, though. He better appreciate you." Danny smiled at the phone, set it down. The knot in her stomach was small, barely there. She told herself it was just nervousness, the good kind, the kind that meant something still mattered. She pulled into the parking structure at 5:40 and cut the engine, sat for a moment in the quiet. The coffee was still warm in her hand. "You used to make more of an effort." She pushed the thought away, tucked it down somewhere dark, and closed the door on it. She got out of the car. The arrivals' doors were straight ahead, sliding open and shut as passengers streamed through with their bags and their tired faces, heading toward people waiting to receive them. Danny walked toward them, coffee in hand, and waited. The arrivals hall smelled like recycled air and floor wax. Danny stood near the far edge of the waiting area, close to the roped-off lane where passengers came through. She held the coffee with both hands now, not because she was cold, but because it gave her something to do. The doors slid open and closed, open and closed. People poured through in waves, businessmen dragging roller bags, families spilling into hugs, a college kid in a wrinkled hoodie looking for his phone. She checked the board. Flight 447 from Charlotte. Landed. She smoothed her jacket, stood a little straighter. She wasn't sure when she'd started feeling like she had to prepare herself just to see her own husband. She pushed that thought away, too. The next wave of passengers came through the doors. She scanned faces. An older couple, a woman in scrubs, 2 men in suits already on their phones, a family with a stroller. Then Terrence. She saw him before he saw her. He looked good. That was the first thing she noticed, the way she always did. The easy confidence in the way he moved, the smile already on his face like the day had treated him well. He had his carry-on rolling behind him, jacket slung over one arm. He looked rested, relaxed. He was laughing. She felt a small warmth start in her chest, and then she saw why. Renee was beside him, not behind him, not a few steps back the way you'd walk with someone you'd happen to run into on a flight. Beside him. Her carry-on rolled parallel to his, her shoulder almost touching his arm, and her right hand rested low on his back. Not the shoulder, not a quick pat. Low, with a settled familiarity, like it had been there before and knew exactly where it belonged. Danny's brain did a strange thing in that moment. It went very quiet. She watched them the way she watched surveillance footage, dispassionately, cataloging. They were talking about something. Renee threw her head back at whatever Terrence said, a full laugh, open and easy. Terrence grinned the way he used to grin at Danny when they were new, when she still surprised him. They were not scanning the crowd. They were not looking for anyone. They had no reason to look. Nobody was supposed to be here. Danny took one step backward, then another. A pillar was behind her, wide, concrete, part of the structural column between baggage claim and the arrivals lane, and she stepped behind it and pressed her back against it, and breathed. They walked past, 10 feet away. She could hear Renee's voice clearly. "You always do this. You always say you're not hungry, and then you eat half my food." Terrence's response, low and laughing, "Your food's better." Then they were past, rolling their bags toward the exit, not touching anymore, just walking close, the comfortable close of 2 people who had been comfortable with each other for a while. The doors slid open. They walked through. Gone. Danny stood behind the pillar. Her hands were shaking. She looked down at them, actually looked, like they belonged to someone else. The coffee cup trembled slightly between her fingers. She tightened her grip, steadied herself. looked up at the ceiling for one long second, the way you do when you are absolutely determined not to cry in a public place, not in an airport arrivals hall surrounded by strangers and their reunions. She was not going to cry here. She walked back to the car. She sat in the parking structure for 4 minutes without moving. The coffee sat in the cup holder, still warm, starting to cool. She had bought it because she wanted to do something nice. She had left work early and driven to the airport and bought his favorite coffee, 1 sugar, no cream, because she had told herself that she just needed to make more of an effort. You used to make more of an effort. She pressed her fingers flat against her thighs and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, slow and deliberate, the way she'd learned to do when a case made her angry and she needed to stay sharp. She thought about the way Renee's hand had rested on his back, the specific placement of it. Low, comfortable, like a habit. She thought about how Renee had called her just last week. "Girl, I've just been swamped. Event season doesn't quit. How's Terrence? Tell him I said hey." Tell him I said hey. Danny started the car. She drove home in silence, no music, no podcasts, just the sound of the road and the hum of the engine and the soft, private sound of everything she was not yet saying out loud. By the time she pulled into the driveway, she had made exactly one decision. Not tonight. No confrontation tonight, no tears, no accusations she couldn't back up with anything except what she'd seen. And one scene at an airport, however damning it felt in her chest, was not a case. She knew better than anyone that a feeling was not a file. She needed a file. She killed the engine and sat in the driveway. She thought about how Terrence would walk through that door in an hour, relaxed and easy, and how he would lie to her face without flinching. And she thought about how she was going to let him. She picked up the cold coffee, walked inside, and waited. The front door opened at 7:42 p.m. Danny heard the key in the lock, heard the familiar sound of his rolling bag bumping over the threshold, heard him exhale the way he always did when he got home, a long, loose breath, like the house itself was a relief. She was in the kitchen. She had made dinner. Nothing elaborate, just pasta and a salad, something to keep her hands busy. She had set the table. She had changed out of her work clothes. She had done all of this deliberately, building a scene that looked like a normal Tuesday evening in their home. "Hey." Terrence appeared in the kitchen doorway, carry-on behind him, jacket already off. He looked at her, then at the table, and smiled. "You cooked." "I had time." She turned from the stove and looked at him, let herself really look. He seemed the same as always, easy, comfortable, no guilt on his face, none that she could see anyway. "How was the flight?" "Long." He came in and kissed her cheek, a quick, habitual press of his lips. He smelled like airport air and someone's perfume that wasn't hers. She noticed it and said nothing. "Charlotte traffic was brutal this morning, so I got there early. Just sat at the gate forever. You know how that goes." She turned back to the stove. "Who dropped you off?" "One of the guys from the conference. Dude from the Memphis office. We shared a ride from baggage claim." He was already moving toward the hallway, already reaching for his bag. "Let me shower and I'll tell you about it." One of the guys. Not Renee's name. Not a single syllable of it. She served dinner and waited. He came back in 20 minutes, hair damp, in a clean t-shirt and sweats, looking rested and calm. He sat down and loaded his plate and talked about the conference the way people talk about things they are describing from the outside. General, practiced, smooth. Danny let him talk for a few minutes. Then she asked, quiet and easy, keeping her voice light. "What was the main session about? The big keynote?" He barely paused. "Regional sales trends, same stuff every year. Quota structures, market shifts." He took a bite. "Nothing groundbreaking." "Where did they put you up? Last time they had you at that Marriott off the highway, right?" A beat. Small, but she caught it. His fork moved to his plate, and he turned it once before answering. "Different place this time. Closer to downtown." He looked up. Why? She shrugged. Just asking. Last time you said the beds were terrible. He laughed. These were better. She smiled and took a sip of her water. He didn't give her a hotel name. Just closer to downtown. Just different place. Just smooth, shapeless words with nothing solid enough to check. That told her plenty. She waited until he fell asleep. He was out by 10:30, head on his pillow, one arm thrown over his eyes the way he always slept, easy and unbothered and deep. She lay beside him in the dark for 11 minutes. Then she got up, took her phone off the nightstand, and went to the kitchen. She sat at the table and opened their shared credit card app in the low light. She went to the recent activity and scrolled. Grocery run 2 weeks ago, a gas station fill-up, his dry cleaning. Then Charlotte. 2 nights, 1 room. A hotel she had never heard him mention, nothing close to a Marriott off a highway, a boutique property right in the middle of Uptown. She tapped the charge and read the details once, carefully, the way she read a claim. She looked at the dates, which were not, she noted, the same dates as the conference, but 1 day earlier and 1 day later, bracketing it like parentheses. Like someone had added extra time, privately, on both ends. She closed the app. She put her phone face down on the table and sat with her hands flat on the wood and breathed. The next morning she made coffee, let Terrence leave for the office with a normal goodbye, and waited 30 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called Renee. Renee answered on the 3rd ring, warm, happy to hear from her. Hey girl, what's up? Nothing much. Danny leaned against the counter, voice easy, matching her tone exactly. Just checking in. How was your weekend? Oh, crazy. I drove up to see my mom. She's been after me to come visit forever. Just got back yesterday, honestly, exhausted. Danny smiled at the window. That's sweet. How is she? Same as always, Renee laughed, feeding me too much and asking about my love life. They talked for 4 more minutes about nothing. Danny laughed in the right places. She said they needed to get lunch soon. She said she'd text her. She hung up. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment, completely still. Then she went to the table, opened her laptop, and created a new document. She sat down, positioned her fingers on the keys, and typed 2 words at the top of the blank white page. Evidence. She saved it. She closed the laptop. Preston Hale's desk was in the back corner of the claims floor, tucked behind a row of filing cabinets, like he preferred it that way. He probably did. In the 3 years Danny had worked alongside him, she had never once seen him socializing by the coffee machine. He came in, he worked, he left. No drama, no gossip, just the quiet, steady click of his keyboard and a desk so organized it looked like a diagram of itself. She stopped at the edge of his workspace on the Thursday morning, files under her arm, like she was just passing through. Hey, she kept her voice casual. You got a minute? Preston looked up from his monitor. He had calm, steady eyes, the kind that took things in without making a show of it. Sure. She sat down in the chair across from him, the one clients used when they came in for interviews, and set her files on her knee. Hypothetical question. For a friend. Something moved across his face. Not suspicion, more like recognition. He leaned back in his chair slowly and folded his hands. Okay. If someone wanted to trace patterns across shared financial accounts, joint cards, shared banking apps, maybe a family phone plan, what's the cleanest way to build a picture, especially if the account holder isn't being straightforward about charges? He was quiet for a moment, not the kind of quiet that meant he was deciding whether to ask questions, the kind that meant he was already thinking about the answer. Export the statements, he said. Every account, every month, as far back as you can go. Don't just scroll through the app. Download the actual PDFs. Then you build a timeline in a spreadsheet. Dates on one axis, amounts and vendors on the other. He paused. Patterns show up fast when you can see everything at once on a flat surface. The app view hides it because you're only ever looking at 1 month, one account. Spread it out and the picture changes. Danny nodded slowly. What about a secondary phone line? If it was added to a family plan without one party knowing? Call the carrier directly. Ask for a full account summary. You're entitled to it if your name is on the plan. He looked at her for a moment. Level, uncomplicated. Anything else? No, she stood. That's helpful, thank you. She picked up her files and turned to go. Danny, she stopped. If your friend needs help organizing the spreadsheet, he said, quiet and even, I'm good at that part. She held his gaze for just a second. Something in her chest pulled tight. I'll let her know, she said. She found the tablet on a Saturday afternoon. It was in the hall closet, on the top shelf behind a shoebox of old chargers and a spare set of keys for a car they no longer owned. She had been looking for a packing envelope, nothing more, but her hand found the flat edge of it first, and she pulled it down, and when the screen lit up from the motion, she saw Terrence's name in the corner of the display. He'd forgotten it was there. That much was clear. It was an older model, one he'd stopped using years ago when he upgraded his phone, but it was still connected to the home Wi-Fi and still signed into his accounts. The battery was at 12%. She plugged it into the charger on the kitchen counter and sat down. She moved through his apps slowly, methodically. She was not panicking. She was working. This was what she knew how to do, follow a thread without letting emotion rush her past the details. She found the folder by accident. It was tucked inside his photo app, labeled with a date rather than a name. A date she recognized immediately. August 14th, the night before her wedding. Her hand stilled on the screen. She tapped it open. They were screenshots of text messages, saved as images, the way someone saves something they want to keep but can't risk leaving in an active thread. The timestamps ran from 11:08 p.m. to 1:47 a.m., the night before the ceremony. While Danny had been at the hotel down the road, laughing with her bridesmaids, doing face masks, telling herself she was the luckiest woman she knew, she read every message. Renee's words came first. I can't stop thinking about earlier. Then Terrence, slower to respond, but responding. Back and forth, careful and charged, the kind of exchange that doesn't happen between two people who are only friends. And then, near the end, Renee's final message before the thread went quiet. Go be with her. We'll figure the rest out later. I'm not going anywhere. Danny set the tablet down on the counter. She sat very still. She thought about the morning of her wedding. Renee showing up early, bright and composed, telling Danny that Terrence had seemed nervous the night before, that she'd run into him in the lobby and talked him through it. Just cold feet, she'd said. He loves you. I straightened him out. Danny had hugged her for that. She had actually hugged her. She picked the tablet back up and took screenshots of every message in the folder. She airdropped them to her phone. She opened her laptop and dropped them into the evidence file. Then she closed the tablet, set it aside, and sat in the dark kitchen. This did not start 8 months ago. It started before the first day. The birthday dinner for Yvonne wasn't until next month, but Renee was already deep into the planning of it. She'd texted Danny a mood board on Tuesday. Sage green and gold, she said. Sophisticated but warm, just like Ms. Yvonne. Danny had replied with a heart emoji and kept eating her lunch. That was the performance now. Emojis, warm voices on the phone, showing up to Sunday dinner at Yvonne's house with a sweet potato pie she'd made from scratch, hugging Terrence's aunts, laughing at the right moments. She moved through her own life like an actress who had memorized every line and had stopped feeling anything about the role. Terrence noticed nothing. That was the thing about him. He had always mistaken her calm for contentment, her patience for simplicity. He saw a woman who didn't make scenes and decided that meant there was nothing underneath. No current, no depth, just a still surface he could walk across without looking down. So he stopped looking down. It started with his phone. He'd been careful for months, screen down on tables, quick to flip it over when she walked into a room. But careful gets heavy after a while. It gets tiring to carry. And Terrence had never been good at carrying anything for too long. On a Wednesday night in late October, she came into the kitchen for a glass of water and found his phone sitting face up on the counter, unlocked, screen still glowing. He was in the shower. The water was running. She didn't pick it up right away. She filled her glass. She took a sip. She looked at the phone. Then she picked it up. There were 3 messages in a thread near the top of his screen, all from a contact saved only as a letter. Just R. That was it. 1 letter, like even the name was something to be careful with. The most recent message read, "Wear the blue one Friday. You know the one." Danny read it twice. Then she set the phone back down exactly as she found it, face up, same angle, same distance from the edge of the counter, and went back to bed. She did not sleep for a long time, but she did not cry either. The financials came next. She had already been working through the bank statements, downloaded, printed, organized into the spreadsheet the way Preston had described, dates on one axis, vendors on the other. When you laid it all out flat, the picture changed. He'd told her that. He was right. The picture was ugly. Over the past 8 months, money had been moving out of their joint savings account in quiet, careful pieces. Not large amounts all at once. Nothing that would trigger a notification or a flag. Just steady withdrawals and transfers, each one small enough to explain away. 200 here, 350 there, a charge she didn't recognize, then another. She cross-referenced everything with the shared credit card statements. She found the jewelry charge on a Thursday in September, $412, a boutique downtown she had never been inside. She pulled up the boutique's website and looked at the page for a few minutes. Small, curated pieces, the kind of place that wrapped things in tissue paper and handwrote a card. She thought about what Terrence had said to her that same week. "We need to tighten the budget a little, babe. I want to be smart about the down payment." She had agreed. She had actually started bringing her lunch to work to cut costs. She printed the statement and photographed the charge. She added both to the evidence file. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, doing the math. Not just on this one charge, but across all of them. The hotel rooms, the transfers, the withdrawals, the jewelry. The down payment account was short by nearly $11,000. The house they had talked about for 4 years. The yard she had described to him once, late at night. The way she wanted to plant things along the back fence. He had listened to all of it and nodded and said, "We're getting there." And then he had taken the money they were building toward that life with and spent it on Renee. She did not let herself sit in that feeling for long. Feelings were something to process later, in Atlanta or somewhere else, in a life that was entirely her own. Right now, there was work to do. She organized the new pages into the file. She updated the spreadsheet. She labeled everything clearly, the same way she would for any case that was going to end up in front of someone who needed to understand it quickly and completely. Then she closed her laptop. She walked down the hall. She stopped at the kitchen counter and picked up Terrence's phone and checked that it was still in the same position she'd left it. It was, and set it back down without touching anything else. She walked into the bedroom. Terrence was already asleep, one arm thrown over his side of the bed, breathing slow and even, unbothered, untouched by any of it. Danny pulled back the covers on her side and got in. She lay on her back in the dark. The room was quiet. Her resolve was not. The lunch was Yvonne's idea. First Sunday of November. Pot roast, dinner rolls, the good china she only brought out when she wanted people to feel like they owed her something. There were 6 of them around the table. Yvonne at the head, Terrence's Aunt Gloria and her husband Ray across from Danny, and Terrence beside Danny, close enough to touch but feeling like a stranger wearing her husband's clothes. Danny had made the sweet potato pie again. She always made the sweet potato pie. The conversation moved the way it always did at Yvonne's table. Easy circles around family news, church gossip, someone's grandchild who was doing something impressive at a school nobody had heard of. Danny ate and smiled and refilled her water glass and stayed exactly as warm as she needed to be. She was getting good at this. She wasn't sure if that was a skill or a wound. It happened between the main course and dessert. Yvonne was talking about an event she'd attended a few weeks back, a fundraiser at the community center, some kind of gala thing, tables and centerpieces and a live band. She had been describing the decorations when the name surfaced, casual as a coin dropped on a hardwood floor. "Renee did the flowers, you know," Yvonne said, patting her mouth with her napkin. "She has such a gift for that." Everything looked just beautiful. She paused, and something crossed her face. Not cruelty, not quite, more like nostalgia or something she hadn't thought to keep to herself. "I always said that girl had real polish, the kind of thing you either have or you don't." She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when she was sharing a thought she considered obvious. "Honestly, when Terrence first started bringing her around back in the day, I thought, well," a small, soft laugh, "I thought she'd make him a good match." The table did not go silent. That was the awful part. Aunt Gloria nodded slowly, the way people do when they agree with something they know they probably shouldn't say out loud. Ray kept eating. Terrence studied his plate like it contained something deeply interesting. Nobody looked at Danny. Nobody corrected the thought. Yvonne seemed to realize, a half-second too late, that she'd said it in front of the woman her son actually married. She set her napkin back in her lap and added brightly, "Of course things worked out just as they should." "Of course." Danny smiled. Warm. Easy. The smile of a woman who was fine. "She really does have an eye for it," Danny said, reaching for her water glass. "She's been helping me plan your birthday dinner, actually. Very organized." She took a sip, then tilted her head with what she hoped looked like fond curiosity. "How long has she been coming to family things? I feel like she's always just been around." Yvonne brightened. This was safe territory. Talking about Renee was always comfortable for her. "Oh, years! Since before you and Terrence were even serious. She and Terrence had the same friend group, and she just fit. You know how some people just fit?" Another small laugh. "She came to Ray and Gloria's anniversary dinner, remember? Before the engagement?" Gloria nodded. "She brought a beautiful bottle of wine." "She was at the Christmas thing at the church," Yvonne continued, warming to the subject now. "The one where we did the coat drive? And Terrence's promotion dinner, the first one. What was that, 2018? She was there." "I wasn't at that one," Danny said, keeping her voice light. "I had that work thing." "That's right." Yvonne said it simply, without apology or awareness. Just a fact. "You weren't there. Renee was." Danny nodded and reached for a dinner roll. She was doing the math. 1. That promotion dinner was 8 months after the wedding. Renee had been at a Freeman family event, without Danny, inside a year of standing at her altar. And nobody at this table had thought to mention it. Nobody had thought it was strange. Nobody had asked whether Danny minded, or whether Danny even knew. They had simply let it be, because it was comfortable. Because Renee was polished and warm and easy to have around. Because Danny had been at work. Because Danny was always at work. She ate her dinner roll. She asked Aunt Gloria about her daughter's new apartment. She helped Yvonne carry dishes back to the kitchen and stood at the sink rinsing plates while Yvonne talked about the birthday dinner menu. And she said, "Yes," and "That sounds perfect," and "Let me know what you need from me in all the right places." She hugged everyone at the door. She hugged Yvonne last, and Yvonne held on for an extra second and said, "You're such a steady girl, Danny. Terrence is lucky." Steady. Not brilliant, not irreplaceable. Steady. Like furniture. Like something solid you stop seeing after a while. Danny smiled and said, "Thank you, Ms. Yvonne." She walked to her car. She set her purse on the passenger seat. She pulled out of the driveway, turned the corner, and drove 2 blocks before she picked up her phone and called Camille. Her sister answered on the second ring. "Hey, how was the Sunday circus?" "Fine," Danny said. Her voice was even. "Cam, you're a paralegal. If someone needed to protect themselves financially, before a divorce, what would they need to have ready?" Camille called back on Tuesday. Danny was at her desk, eating a sandwich she hadn't tasted, when her phone buzzed. She let it go to voicemail. She was in the middle of pulling credit card statements for a client case, a contractor who'd billed for work never done, and the irony of it sat quietly in the back of her throat. She listened to the voicemail on her lunch break, sitting in her car in the parking garage. "I found some things. Call me when you're alone." That evening, Terrence was home early. He had been doing that lately, coming home at a reasonable hour, sitting on the couch, watching television with the comfortable ease of a man who believed everything was fine. He had even brought home Thai food without being asked, setting the containers on the counter the way he used to when they first moved in together. Danny watched him open the boxes and thought, he has no idea. She set out plates, she poured water, she sat down across from him and waited until he was relaxed. Noodles, some sports highlight he was half watching, and then she said it casually, the way she might mention a grocery list. "I heard back from Hargrove Group today." Terrence looked up. "The Atlanta firm?" "Mm-hmm." She picked up her fork. "They reached back out about the senior director position, the one I turned down 3 years ago. They have an opening again." He was quiet for a second. "Wow." The word came out carefully. That's great, Danny." "It would be a real step up," she said. "Better title, better salary. Atlanta's not that far. We could sell the house, get something new down there. Fresh start." She looked at him. "What do you think?" She watched his face move through something he was trying not to show. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even the careful thoughtfulness of a man weighing a real decision. It was something closer to alarm, quickly covered, quickly smoothed back into a neutral expression, but not quickly enough. He said, "it's worth thinking about. My territory is here, though. A move like that would be complicated for my position." "People make it work," Danny said. "Yeah." He stabbed at a noodle. "I'd just about it." He would have to think about it. He had an answer ready in 3 seconds the last time a transfer came up at his firm. He had called her from the parking lot, voice bright, already decided. "Sure," she said. "Take your time." She ate her food. He went back to the television. Neither of them said anything else about Atlanta. She called Renee the next morning. "I've been thinking about Ms. Yvonne's birthday," Danny said. Her voice was warm, easy, the voice of a woman who had no idea what she knew. "You did such a good job with the centerpieces for the Harmon event. I showed Yvonne the photos and she loved them. Would you be willing to help pull something together? Full dinner, family, some of her church friends?" Renee's pause was barely a beat. "Oh, absolutely. You know I love Yvonne." "She loves you too," Danny said. "I was thinking the Whitmore room at the Riverside Club. They have a private dining space, family style, maybe 40 people." "That's perfect," Renee said. "I can put together some concepts this week. We'll make it really special." "I knew I could count on you," Danny said. She hung up and sat quietly for a moment. Both of them would be there, in the same room, with the full family, with no advance warning of what was coming. She opened her laptop and added Riverside Club, Whitmore Room to the document. Camille came over Thursday evening, while Terrence was at what he had called a work dinner. She sat at Danny's kitchen table with her laptop open and a folder of printed pages in front of her. She had her paralegal face on, focused, careful, steady. But when she looked up at Danny, something else moved behind her eyes. "I looked into Renee's divorce," Camille said. "The one from last year. The one she cried to you about for 6 weeks straight?" Danny poured 2 glasses of water and sat down. "What did you find?" Her ex-husband, Kevin Coleman, cited an affair as cause for the divorce. Camille slid a printed page across the table. It was a copy of the public court filing. "He wasn't the one who had it." Danny looked at the paper. "She told you she was the wronged party?" Camille said. She told you he was emotionally unavailable and pulled away, and she had to file just to get out. She cried in your kitchen, Danny. You drove her to the courthouse." "I know." Danny's voice was quiet, flat. "She's done this before." Camille said it simply. No drama, just the fact of it, laid clean on the table between them. "This isn't you, specifically. This is what she does." The kitchen was quiet. Danny picked up the paper. She read it once, slowly, the way she read every document, looking for details, filling in the shape of things. Then she set it down and slid it back into the folder. She stood, carried the folder to the second bedroom, and added it to the file that was no longer thin. The attorney's name was Gloria Marsh. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, clean and quiet, with tall windows and pale gray walls. Nothing flashy, no plaques arranged to impress, just a neat desk, 2 chairs across from it, and a woman in her 50s who had clearly seen everything and forgotten nothing. Camille had referred her. "She's the one I call when it's serious," was all she said. Danny sat down, set her folder on her lap, and told Gloria Marsh the short version. Not the pain of it, not the wedding photo she still hadn't taken down from the hallway. Just the facts, the joint account, the withdrawals, the receipts, the timeline. Gloria listened without interrupting. When Danny finished, the attorney pulled a legal pad close and uncapped her pen. "The money moved from a joint account?" "Yes." "Do you have documentation of the balance before and after the withdrawals?" Danny opened her folder and slid 3 printed pages across the desk. Bank statements, highlighted in yellow. Amounts, dates, a clear line showing where the savings had been and where they sat now. Gloria looked at them for a moment. Then she said, "This is clean work." "I do this for a living," Danny said. A small nod. "Then you already know what this shows." "I do." Gloria set down her pen. "In this state, funds withdrawn from a marital joint account and used for the benefit of a third party, particularly a romantic partner, are subject to restitution in divorce proceedings. It's called dissipation of marital assets." She said it plainly. No softness in it, no drama, just the law. Courts don't look favorably on it, especially when it's this well documented. Danny nodded. "I'll need you to sign some initial paperwork today," Gloria said. "Nothing that files yet, but it protects your position. It establishes the date you sought counsel, which matters if he moves to transfer anything else in the meantime." "What do I need to do between now and when I'm ready to file?" "Stop moving money yourself. Document anything that changes. Don't tell him you've been here." Gloria looked at her steadily. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Danny said. "I've been doing it for weeks." She signed the forms at Gloria's desk. 4 pages. She read every line before she signed. Old habit, the kind that had never once failed her. Then she put her copies in the folder, slid the folder into her bag, and thanked Gloria Marsh with a handshake that was firm and unhurried. In the elevator going down, she looked at her own reflection in the silver doors and felt something settle. Not relief, exactly. More like the quiet that comes after you've locked a door you've been meaning to lock for a long time. She went back to the office that afternoon. Preston was at his desk when she stopped by, 2 monitors open, a legal pad covered in numbers beside his keyboard. He looked up. "The figures from that joint account project," she said, keeping her voice level. "Can you do one more pass before end of day?" He didn't ask why. He didn't ask anything. He just pulled up the spreadsheet she had shared with him, neatly labeled, no names, just Account A and Account B, the way they had agreed, and started from the top. 30 minutes later, he rolled his chair back and said, "The total's consistent across every statement. $18,400, over 7 months. He looked at her. "Whoever put this together did it carefully." "Thank you," she said. "Danny." His voice was quiet. She met his eyes. "You've got it." She nodded once and went back to her desk. She printed the full timeline that night after Terrence fell asleep. She worked at the kitchen table with the lamp on low and the house quiet around her. The printer ran slowly, page after page. The wedding eve messages, screenshotted and dated. the hotel charges in Charlotte, the jewelry receipt. Alderman Fine Jewelry, $780, March 4th. The same week Terrence told her to watch their spending. The bank statements with the withdrawals. Camille's copy of the Coleman divorce filing. She put it all in order, newest to oldest. Then she reconsidered and arranged it oldest to newest. Let it build the way it had actually unfolded, the way it would land hardest. She paper-clipped each section, labeled each tab with a small sticky note. She had made files like this hundreds of times at work. Evidence was only as useful as its presentation. When she was done, she set the folder in her bag by the door. In the bedroom, she hung her outfit for the morning on the closet door. A navy dress, simple, fitted, something she'd bought for herself 6 months ago and hadn't worn yet. Clean lines, nothing that asked for attention. She stood in front of the mirror for a moment. She thought about the opening lines she had settled on. Not rehearsed exactly, more like known, carried and turned over until they were smooth. She said nothing out loud. She turned off the light and went to sleep. In the morning, she woke before her alarm. She dressed without rushing. She made coffee, drank half of it, standing at the kitchen window while the neighborhood was still gray and quiet. She rinsed her cup. She picked up her bag. The folder was inside it. She walked to the door. The party was already full when Danny arrived. Yvonne's backyard had been dressed up nicely. String lights ran from the fence to the back of the house. Round tables with white tablecloths. A banner stretched across the patio that said, "Happy Birthday, Mom," in gold letters. Someone had put fresh flowers in glass vases, roses and something small and white Danny couldn't name. It looked warm. It looked like family. Danny walked through the back gate and smiled at Yvonne's neighbor first, then Yvonne's sister, then the cousins she recognized from Christmas cards. She hugged people. She said, "You look wonderful, and I love that color on you." And she meant it. Or at least, she meant the kindness behind it. She set the card she'd brought for Yvonne on the gift table and smoothed the front of her navy dress. Terrence was across the yard near the drink table, holding a cup and laughing at something one of his cousins said. He looked relaxed, easy. He hadn't noticed her come in yet. Renee was near the patio doors, talking to Yvonne. She had on a cream-colored blouse and her hair was down. She was smiling the way she always smiled, wide, warm, curated, like a woman who had never done anything wrong in her life. Danny watched them both for a moment. Then she found Camille near the rose bushes along the fence, standing with a glass of lemonade and watching the same scene with flat, steady eyes. Camille looked at Danny. Danny gave her a small nod. She waited until the food had been set out and most people had settled, until the yard was full and the conversations had layered into that comfortable noise that family gatherings make when everyone is at ease. Then she walked to the center of the patio, near the head table, and said clearly, "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" It took a few seconds. Heads turned. Conversations dropped off one by one. Yvonne looked over from her seat at the head table, curious, pleased, probably assuming a toast. Terrence looked up. Renee went still. Danny did not look at either of them, yet. She reached into her bag and took out the folder. She set it on the table in front of her. "I want to say something," she said, her voice even. "And I want to say it here, because the people in this yard deserve to hear it directly from me." She opened the folder. 8 months ago, my husband began an affair with my best friend. She said it the way she would read a case summary. No shake in it, no performance. It did not begin 8 months ago, however. It began the night before our wedding. She heard someone inhale sharply to her left. She didn't look. She lifted the first page and held it up. These are messages between Terrence and Renee, dated the evening of June 14th, 7 years ago, the night before I married him. She set the page flat on the table and moved to the next. These are hotel charges from a Charlotte property. 1 room, 2 nights. Dated the same weekend, Terrence told me he was attending a regional sales conference. Terrence set his cup down. Danny, I'm not finished. The yard was completely silent. She lifted the jewelry receipt. Alderman fine jewelry, $780, March 4th. That same week, Terrence told me we needed to tighten our budget. She set it down. This receipt was paid from our joint savings account, the same account we had been building for 3 years for a down payment on a house. She moved to the bank statements. She didn't hold them up. She just placed them on the table, visible to anyone close enough to see. $18,400. Gone. Over 7 months. Terrence's voice came out louder now, harder at the edges. You want to do this here? In front of my family? He took 2 steps toward her. You've been working 70-hour weeks for years, Danny. You were never home. What was I supposed to? Sit down, Terrence. It was Yvonne who said it. Her voice was low and tight. He stopped. Danny looked at him then, directly. I have documentation for every claim I just made. If you'd like to dispute any of it, I have copies. He said nothing. She turned to Renee. Renee's face had gone carefully still. Her chin was up. Danny, I know how this looks, but you and I have known each other for 15 years. I was your maid of honor. Whatever you think happened. Camille, Danny said. Her sister stepped forward from near the fence, calm as a closing argument. Renee's divorce last year, Camille said, addressing the yard, not just Renee. Her ex-husband filed citing an affair. Renee never disclosed that to Danny. She cried to her instead, for weeks, as the wronged party. Camille paused. This is not the first time she's done this to someone she called a friend. The sound that moved through the yard was not loud. It was the quiet kind. Chairs shifting, a glass being set down carefully, someone whispering a name. Renee's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Yvonne sat with both hands flat on the table. Her eyes moved from Renee to Terrence and then down to the tablecloth. The color had gone out of her face. Danny closed the folder. I'm done speaking, she said. She picked up her bag. She walked across the patio, past the tables, through the back gate. She did not look back. The folder sat in Danny's attorney's hands by Monday morning. Sandra Okafor was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quiet way of listening that reminded Danny of herself. She read through every page without rushing. She asked 3 clarifying questions. Then she set the documents down and said, "We have more than enough." The process wasn't fast. It was never fast. But it was steady, and steady was something Danny understood. Sandra filed for the recovery of the misappropriated joint funds first. $18,400 pulled from a shared account for someone else's jewelry and hotel rooms and weekend trips. Terrence didn't contest it. His attorney sent a letter within 2 weeks that essentially amounted to, "He agrees." Danny read it at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and felt nothing dramatic. Just the quiet satisfaction of a column of numbers finally balancing. The divorce papers were signed 6 weeks after the party. Terrence moved his things out on a Tuesday while Danny was at work. She came home to half-empty closets and a garage with gaps where his things used to be. She stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen, made dinner, and ate it at her own table in her own silence. It was the best meal she'd had in months. Renee's name started disappearing from things slowly, the way a stain fades, not all at once, but steadily, until one day you realize it's just gone. It wasn't a campaign. Nobody organized it. That was the thing about a social circle built on real relationships. When the truth moved through it, it moved the way truth tends to. Person to person, over coffee, during phone calls, in the parking lot after church. Did you hear what happened at Yvonne's party? And then, did you know about her divorce? And then, I always thought something was off. Renee's event planning business ran on referrals. The same families who had hired her for graduations and anniversary parties and baby showers. The same people who had been standing in Yvonne's backyard that Saturday afternoon. The calls slowed. Then they stopped. She picked up a few clients outside that circle, people who didn't know her history yet. But the foundation had cracked, and foundations don't hold once the crack runs all the way through. Danny didn't track it. She didn't need to. She heard things secondhand and let them settle without adding to them. Yvonne called 3 weeks after the party. She didn't make excuses. That surprised Danny. "I said things about that woman in your presence that I should not have said," Yvonne told her, her voice low and careful. "I let her in places I should have looked at more closely. That's on me." Danny listened. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now," Yvonne continued. "I just need you to know I see it." "I hear you, Yvonne," Danny said. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a door left open, and that was enough for now. The extended family had already closed in around Danny with the quiet efficiency of people who had been waiting for permission to choose a side. Cousins texted. Aunts sent cards. Nobody said we never liked him because that wasn't quite true and everyone knew it. But they showed up in small ways, and small ways added up. The thing with Terrence's reputation happened without intention. A mutual contact, a woman named Patrice who worked in the same regional sales industry, called Danny about a month after the party. Patrice had heard something through the circuit and was asking plainly, the way direct people do, "Is everything okay with you and Terrence?" Danny told her the truth, simply, without embellishment. He had an affair. It went on for some time. "We're divorcing." She didn't post anything. She didn't send emails. She said it once, to one person who asked her directly, and she said it clearly. In sales, reputation is currency. Terrence spent the next several months finding out how much of his he'd already burned. 18 months later, Atlanta was warm in a way that still caught Danny off guard sometimes. She drove to work with the windows down. Her team, 7 investigators, 2 of them fresh out of training, was waiting on a complex multi-state case she'd been assembling for 3 weeks. She liked the weight of it, the way the pieces fit together when you were patient enough to let them. Preston had taken a role at a consulting firm that worked alongside her company on interstate cases. They talked every week, sometimes more. It had started professionally, trading notes, comparing methodologies, and had gradually become something easier and warmer and harder to categorize. Not that Danny was in any hurry to categorize it. She was learning, slowly, to let things be what they were. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a building with big, south-facing windows. She had chosen every piece of furniture herself. She had painted the living room a warm, deep green that she loved unreasonably. That night she was organizing a box of old things when the wedding photo slipped out from between 2 books. She picked it up. She and Terrence, 7 years ago. The white dress, the flowers, Bishop Reeves smiling behind them. She looked at it for a long moment, not with grief, not with anger, with the calm, clear-eyed distance of a woman who had already understood something and filed it away properly. She set the photo back in the box, closed the lid, turned off the light. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!